Insiders who are here to weigh in on the growing VA controversy, and you can join in the conversation on Twitter at Harris Faulkner, at FN Insiders, hashtag FRW. Some of you are already doing that. I'm going to get your comments in just a moment live on the air. John LeBoutillier is sitting with me here, former Republican congressman for New York. Pat Caddell, a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter and Fox News contributor via satellite on this Memorial Day weekend. And Doug Schoen, former pollster for President Bill Clinton and Fox News contributor as well, via satellite on this fine Memorial Day weekend. And look at that. It looks like you guys are still here. That's amazing how just technology. Boom, there it is. Let's start with some ideas that are already crossing Twitter. I asked before we came into this conversation here for you guys to give me your ideas. Yvonne tweets, private care is needed if immediate appointment cannot be made for our vets. Vanessa A. Fiore writes, give our veterans vouchers and allow doctors to deduct their medical treatment from their IRS reportable income. Pat Caddell, I'm going to start with you tonight. She calls that a win-win.
Yes, I think that, this is, we talked about last week, and it's obvious the problem with the VA has been going on for a long time. John can speak to his proposal, which goes to some of the things we're hearing now, letting vets go to private hospitals. But this has been going on for decade after decade. But what really bothers me the most is that there's a culture. We have a president who says, who, by the way, and I'm very glad he went to Afghanistan today, but whose basic attitude is about the military has been, and, and now he's in a crisis. So I would hope he would have gone anyway. I can't help but feeling it's partly to deflect the political criticism, because I think it's well-deserved for the way the culture that in this government operates.
Doug, is that too pessimistic, or is that on the money with you?
Well, I hope that Pat is being too cynical, but I fear that there's probably some truth to it. Harris, I think this is one of those situations where it's not a question of rush to judgment. There's a need for action. General Shinseki has got to go. We need to adopt a variety of different options to get veterans the care they need immediately, whether it be vouchers, IRS deductions, or John's idea, which is to give health care benefits similar to congressmen to all veterans. One or the other or all of them have to be put in place, and we need top-to-bottom overhaul of the VA, pure and simple.
John, I want to talk with you about these calls for Eric Shinseki, the VA secretary, to resign, and just get your thoughts on that. And before that, let's pop up those numbers that I want to show everybody. This is a recent CBS poll. It showed when asked, should Eric Shinseki resign, 45% of people said yes, 31% of people said no. I think this is interesting. A quarter of people said they don't know. I would say arguably they might not even know who he is.
Well, like 40% of people don't know who the vice president is, so why would they know who the Secretary of Veterans Affairs are?
Why is that important?
Well, look, this is a bigger problem than just the guy who's now running the VA. This thing's been going on for 50 years. We hear this now. I've been inundated since last week's show with veterans coming to me telling me their stories about what's happened to them since the mid-'60s, the bad care. And I think the three of us, what we do on this show is we try to look at politics in a big picture, right? And the big picture of this thing is the VA scandal is a template for what's wrong with politics in America, okay? The government doesn't give a damn about the people it's supposed to care for. They don't care about these veterans. They use them in the war. They send them 8 times to Afghanistan. And when they come back, they send them off to some dump, and they don't care about them. And they spend $490 million on curtains, office furniture, and conference rooms. And that's not just Obama spending it. The Republican House allocated the money. They have oversight. So they're equally guilty of dumping on our veterans, which is a sin of the worst degree.
You know what? I want to go back, Pat Caddell, to what President Obama, then candidate 2008, said on the stump. And fast forward to where we are now. Let's watch that.
How can we let this happen? How is this acceptable in the United States of America? The answer is it's not. It is an outrage. It is a betrayal of the ideals that we ask our troops to risk their lives for. But it doesn't have to be this way. Not in this country. Not if we decide that this time will be different. There are many aspects of this war that have gone inalterably wrong, but caring for our veterans is one thing we can still get right.
The president started, how can we let this happen? 2008. It's 2014. Pat, that's a really good question.
Well, it's the same one we should ask about his transparency and everything else. Look, you know, this is a president who said, I know nothing. The Sergeant Schultz defense, as it was with the IRS, as it is with every scandal, as it was with I don't know. I know nothing about it. You know, the problem is that there is a culture in Washington that John was alluding to and I was trying to refer to earlier, of our government, of the government complex, which is everyone in Washington is there to serve themselves. We have people in the VA getting bonuses for killing people, for God's sake. Obama hasn't cared anything about it any more than he has cared about what happened at the IRS or anything else. But the culture here is unbelievable. It is that the people serve the government. Government is there for us to feather our nest. The VA is the worst example, and it's so amazing now to see even even people in my party upset who can't seem to get themselves upset about all the other scandals. But it is a mentality in Washington that says screw the people and the hell with them, as John said. And it's really, and the president, he doesn't really care. I'm sorry to be so cynical, but truthful.
You know, Doug, when you look at all this and you hear about calls for Shinseki to resign, there is some concern, kind of a growing drumbeat of critics out there who say, well, if you let that happen, where will the accountability be? What do you think of that?
Well, I think the accountability has to be that if you're running a department and it's not working and people are literally dying on your watch and there's abuse after abuse, as John was saying, going back to the 50s, you have to take bold and decisive action. Pat is right. The president and the administration have basically used a we know nothing defense for scandal after scandal. And Harris, the key point here is this goes to the lives of those who've given the most to our country. This is not, you know, an abstract scandal about what might have happened with conservative groups or journalists. This goes to what average, everyday, hardworking, and yes, patriotic Americans have put up with for much too long, and there's got to be accountability and action now.
Well, Independent 2 says on Twitter, you know, I blame them all in Washington because the president and Congress are too busy fighting each other and not doing their jobs. We had a seminal moment, if you will, in terms of collecting ideas last Sunday night. John, you pitched one out. Let's watch that, and then we'll talk about it.
Here is a solution, okay? We are going to abolish the VA, Harris. Get rid of it, close it down, get rid of it. Hand every veteran an insurance card. And the insurance card gives them the exact same insurance that every member of Congress has.
It has been a firestorm in social media. I went to your Twitter feed, F Insiders, to see what people were saying, and they were putting me in their tweet line a tremendous response.
Yeah.
Why?
A, it's an idea that makes sense, and it values a veteran's health equal to a member of Congress. Now, frankly, I think a veteran's health care is more valuable than a member of Congress, but seeing as how Congress would have to vote on this thing.
Now, you used to be in Congress, so you know of what you speak,
I'd like
right?
to see one veteran, one congressman tell me that his health care is more important than a veteran. So I think
we have members, though, who've served.
Oh, absolutely. And they would vote for this thing. They would vote for it. Sure
now,
they would.
Some of the viewers I saw, Doug and Pat, said that this isn't necessarily a fresh or a new idea, but it's the only one that they're hearing being talked about right now as going forward beyond the scandal.
Let me say,
and it's a good idea, Harris. Yeah, it's just practical, it's reasonable, and it says to the American people what Pat was saying, and I know he'll speak to this now, that ordinary people in America who live, work, and pay their taxes, fight for their country, are entitled to the same benefits as the political class.
Pat, please.
Well, I want to say, then I disagree with my good friend and colleague Doug about the focus on the director. That's what Washington will do. Let's fire him and do nothing. This has been going on for decades. General Shinseki was a great hero. I don't know whether he should be running. He probably should have been running the VA. But they will use that to get away from their own culpability. Lack of oversight, as John has said, the administration's ability to fluff off every scandal, and in the bureaucracy, a sense of entitlement that is so outrageously immoral. But that is the code of Washington until we sweep that aside. Look, here's the point, ladies and gentlemen. If they will do this to veterans, what do they think they will do to you?
That's
Wow.
a huge
And they
point.
do it.
That's a huge point. The other point I want to make that I had mentioned to Doug and Pat on Friday, Harris, was that during the debate over Obamacare, one of the arguments that the administration made was that Obamacare was going to be a success like health care for veterans in the VA was. Well, look at what we've now learned about the quality of the care. And we are headed down that road. We hear people say, ultimately, we're going to have a single-payer plan.
Interesting.
Single-payer plan is what the veterans have, basically. And it's a disaster. You have rationing, you have hiding on the books because you can't get the care to people when they need it. If they'll, as Pat and Doug just said, if they'll take a hero and throw the poor guy on the trash heap, what will they do to an average person?
Doug, last thoughts on this particular issue, and then we're going to move on.
You know, Pat and John are right. Look, it isn't the director, but he is the symbol of the inefficiency and abuses, and top-to-bottom review needs to be done. Otherwise, the Democrats will pay an even bigger price than they are likely to pay at the polls in November. Mark my words.
All right, I fibbed. You don't get the last word. Our viewers do. Time Out says, the veterans deserve the same health care Congress has. They will never get it because the Congress believes they are elite.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, look, can I just make one other point, which John just raised, which is critical, which is this should change the debate about Obamacare. This is what they do to veterans. Now you want the government to run the national health care system. What do you think's going to happen? We have a case in point here.
Stay close, everybody. The conversation continues with the political insiders right here on the Fox Report Weekend.